I would just drink, and I would drink at home enough to pass out pretty much every night.
Welcome, everybody. It's me, Craig Perra, and you are listening to Sex Afflictions and Porn Addictions. I'm the host, the founder of the Mindful Habit System, and this is a podcast to help you create healthy sexuality and a great life. And to create a great life, that means we got to deal with our coping strategies. And today I have a very special guest, Chris Shatek from Freedom from Alcohol. You can find him on the web at coachbychris.com. Chris, so glad you're here. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Craig. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. We have a mutual friend, my old friend back from college, and I found Chris on Facebook. I said, hey, I got to talk to this guy. Like me, he developed an alternative to 12 steps, and we're going to talk about that today. But let's start with the origin story. How did you get to this place? What was it about your journey that inspired you to leave your old life and do this, for a living?
Yeah. It's really interesting because if you would have asked me 5 years ago if I would be doing this, I would have said you're crazy. There's no way in hell because I grew up wanting to be on the radio. That was my whole life. And I did it for about 22 years. I was an on-air personality and it was good for the most part. But I had found myself not feeling fulfilled and just kind of going through the motions of life. I had gotten into the comfort zone of, I've done this for so long and it's all right, but I'm really not doing anything to make a difference in my life. And so I would cope with that instead of working on myself and doing anything about it. I would just drink, and I would, drink at home enough to pass out pretty much every night. Like it got to that point. I had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol for about 15 years. And not to mention in the radio industry, you host bar events that are sponsored by alcohol companies, and so you're kind of it's kind of the life that I was living. Especially, I worked in the country music format, and I don't know if you've ever listened to any country music, but there's a lot of drinking involved with that. So I was kind
It
of caught
sure
up in
is.
the in that whole lifestyle and going through the motions of all that, and it was fine. Like life was pretty good. But I knew the more I drank, the more I got away from who I really was. And that was starting to scare me. And it's not like my life was in shambles or anything like that, but it just got to the point where I'm like, I got to do something about this. And I would take a break from drinking, 30 days here, a couple of weeks there, but I kept going back to it. I couldn't figure out why that was. I'll talk about all that in a minute, but it got to the point in 2020 during the shutdown, I lost my job. Again, the radio career, I've been doing it for 22 years. It was like my whole identity, and I had it wrapped up in this. And so that was devastating. I got hired by Apple that same day, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess it's Apple, so I don't want to turn them down. So I started working for them, got fired by them 9 months later, and just decided, okay, the universe is finally telling me, do something different with your life. Something's not working. Something feels wrong here. And so in that moment, I decided if I'm going to go have the life that I know that I'm meant for and that I'm proud of and be that guy that I know I can be, alcohol has to get out of my life because I knew that was the one thing holding me back from going and being and doing all these things that I wanted to do. And I didn't even know what that was at that point, but I had to say goodbye to the alcohol. And so I did in that moment. And I never looked back. I figured out a way to move forward with my life and not miss alcohol, not feel like I'm missing out, not want it, but genuinely be proud of myself and empowered to go, you know what? Alcohol is not serving me anymore. I don't want it to be a part of my life. I'm going to go and do this thing. And so it just kind of started there. And, I started going, what do I want to do with my life? Well, I'd always wanted to help people. My whole life, I kind of been the guy who people would come to with problems and I would listen and just kind of talk to them about it. And I knew I wanted to make a difference in their lives. Like I was talking about earlier, like feeling unfulfilled in the radio industry. So I thought, what can I do where I can help people? And I thought, well, this life coach thing, I don't know where it came from, but I saw a couple people doing it. And I'm like, I want to do that. And then I started working with some coaches myself to figure out what was the next step in my life. And they said, well, what's something that you've overcome? And I said, well, really honestly, what was fresh in my mind at that time was the alcohol part, because I could see myself starting to turn a corner, starting to feel better. And I said, I want to help people realize that there's more to life beyond getting drunk every night and just being in that place. And so it just kind of started from there and started helping people break free from alcohol in a non-traditional sort of way. And it has grown. And man, we've had some really amazing success, and our clients are crushing it with their new alcohol-free lives.
Well, and so when you start this journey, there is, or start your recovery journey, there's overwhelming pressure for you to do what everyone else has done. It is a very simple solution. You go to therapy and you go to meetings. And there was something about that. And let me just say to everybody who's listening, different strokes for different folks. If you're getting value, going to meetings, great. A lot of people, some people don't. Some people, it's not a fit. Some people like apple pie, some people like chocolate cake, not to grossly oversimplify. So there was something about the traditional that wasn't calling to you. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I knew that the like an AA meeting was not going to be the way that I wanted to do this because number one, I didn't want to label myself an alcoholic. I didn't want to sit in a dark basement and say I'm powerless and broken and all this kind of stuff. And I didn't want to have to work on this forever. Like, okay, the only way to do it is to like abstain and stay away and force myself not to and got to keep going to lifelong meetings. Like that scared me. And I'll be honest with you, before alcohol, I was addicted to gambling, smoking. I've been addicted to porn as well. Like I've been addicted to pretty much everything. And I went to a gambling anonymous meeting back in my early 20s when I had a problem with gambling. And I hated it. It was depressing. There was a lot of shame. I didn't get anything out of it. As a matter of fact, I left the meeting and I went and gambled. Like it didn't. The thought of going that route scared me, and that's what literally kept me from pulling the trigger on quitting drinking for many years before that because I thought that was pretty much my only option. It's either, okay, I got to do a 12-step thing, or I've got to go to a rehab, or I've got to just white knuckle it. Now, I'm not against any of those things, however, like you were just saying, whatever works for people, do it, right? And the community aspect of the 12-step thing, I think is an amazing thing. We do that with our clients. We have a community, but we lift people up. We don't involve shame. We don't sit around and talk about all the stuff that we've done and try to one up each other with like stories of horrors of things that we've done. It's we talk about your life and stuff like that. But I knew that none of those options were going to work for me because I just didn't connect with it. I didn't feel like I would belong. And I hear that a lot from our clients too, that it's just not something that was attracting them, or they've been to a meeting and they just felt like this isn't for me, because there's a spectrum when it comes to it, right? And I hate labels. I hate the word alcoholic. I don't even like the word sober. I don't even like the word recovery. All of these traditional things that you think of, because it just seems like it's like you're a bad person, you're a shameful person because you've gotten addicted to this thing. Well, here's the deal: alcohol is the second most addictive substance on the planet, only behind heroin. Okay, and it kills over 3 million people worldwide every year, while heroin kills about 90,000 people every year. One of them's legal, one of them's not. So I always want to like preface to people that you're not a bad person because you got addicted to alcohol. Everybody, everywhere you look, it's the social elixir of life, alcohol seems to be. And so it's easy to see how people get into this pattern. And one of the things I think that keeps people from talking about it or doing anything about it is, well, I don't want to be an outcast. I don't want to be looked at it as this person who's an alcoholic, right? Who can't control their drinking. I really don't think it's about that. It's about you started drinking an addictive substance in your either teens or 20s or whatever, and it was fine. And at some point, you cross the line where it's like you can't take it or leave it anymore, and that gets to a scary place. And you try to stop, you try to stay away from it. You keep yourself going back to it, and it can be a really hopeless feeling. And I don't believe going to meetings and continuing to talk about this sort of hopelessness and all this stuff is going to move people forward. So it just the whole idea of the traditional methods really a turn off to me. And look, the success rate is like 5 to 8% of AA, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason that it doesn't work in the long term.
Yeah. Well, and the identity piece, the more I've learned about identity, and Atomic Habits has a great chapter on identity. And it's almost as if you read the chapter, it's almost as if he went out of his way to avoid talking about 12 steps, because just in my mind, I can imagine the author not wanting to court any controversy, but how you identify yourself is very important. And so let's accept the reality that some people who identify as an alcoholic and that becomes their reminder to not do the bad things, God bless them. It works for them. For
Yeah.
others, it keeps them stuck in that this is who I am. The goal is to become someone else. The goal is to become not an alcoholic for, again, our clients, or a sex addict, to become, I don't do that anymore.
Yep.
I don't do that anymore. And that is what I think keeps a lot of people stuck. The obsessive focus on the problem, the reinforcement of the identity with the problem. For our clients and the people who are listening to my podcast and listen to yours, it worked for them, not
Yep.
identifying. So let's do you understand what I mean? Do you agree with that?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. I don't want to identify myself for the rest of my life as I'm a broken person who's powerless and I've got to surrender myself to a higher power. And look at me, I'm a poor, pitiful person and an alcoholic. And yeah, that's not who I am. I'm a lot more than that. I'm a guy who had a unhealthy relationship with alcohol, and I wanted to do something about it, and I did. And that doesn't mean that you're denying anything. I'll hear people say, well, because you don't say you're an alcoholic, that means that you're just in denial. No, I absolutely drank way more than I should, and I shouldn't have done it. And that's not saying that I need to then for the rest of my life label myself as an alcoholic. I mean, somebody quits smoking, they don't go around saying they're a smokeaholic or a recovering, whatever, a holic for the rest of their life. You had a problem and you moved on for it. And you were absolutely right about creating a new identity. That's one of the things that we help our clients do. And, I just did an interview with one of our clients who's 13 months without alcohol. And we don't really keep track. We don't have people track their days like day by day. I don't think that's beneficial either. But he's been alcohol free now for over 13 months. He has no desire to drink, which is a big difference compared to traditional methods. And he talked about how his dad was in AA for 40 years. And you know what? It worked for his dad. But the reason why he didn't want to do AA was because he saw his dad, and that was his whole life, meetings every day. He talked about how I am an alcoholic, and that was his personality. And there's so many people that just like, no, that's not going to work for me.
Yeah, well, it's so wonderful that today, now people have options. Let's talk about some of these people who are struggling. Why do people keep relapsing? Relapsing is obviously a huge problem. Now, it doesn't have to be the end of the world. A stumble can just be a stumble. And you take, for example, Chris, I'm aware of cases where people have committed suicide because they had to turn in or they surrendered their chip, for years and years and years and years. And then they have to go back to that day one, which highlights the peril in counting days for some people. That's going to be the caveat. Anybody who's listening getting angry right now, for some people, okay?
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be the end of the world. But what do you find with your clients? Why do people keep relapsing?
Yeah, and it's such a good point. It is a stumble or a trip. It's not. You don't have to like, oh God, all this work that I've done, throw it down the tubes. That's not. You're a human. You're not a robot, right? So these things can happen. The point though is most people end up going back to alcohol because they haven't done. There's a couple of reasons. They haven't done the inner work that needs to be done. You can't just make a big life change like not drinking alcohol anymore when you've done it for so long, right? It's been your crutch. It's your buddy. It's been there good days, bad days. And then all of a sudden you're just not going to have it there anymore. And you don't change anything else about your life. You don't do the inner work to figure out why you were drinking, to get that clarity, to figure out why you don't want to drink, figure out who you really want to become, and take care of the things that you've been avoiding. Like all of this inner work needs to be done so you can grow as a person. Your mindset has to change. You got to figure all that out. It's the equivalent of if you have an old car and it's kind of beat up, you haven't put oil in it in a long time, you haven't really taken care of it. You're just going to go put a fresh coat of paint on it and think, okay, it's all good. It's not. It's still not going to run because the stuff inside hasn't been taken care of. So that's the first thing. You really need to get to the bottom of all these things when you stop drinking. But the other thing is,
Well, one
most
point
people,
on that, Chris, I just want to make to highlight that point. I like to say sobriety is 10% of the solution. Not
Mhm.
doing, and that 10% might be an exaggeration. The longer I do this, the lower that number became. 5 years ago, it was 50%, or 6, 7 years ago, it was 50%. Then it went to 25, and now it keeps going down to 10. And I like it when people think of it as medicine. And if you're using alcohol to function, to get through the day, and you are using this powerful chemical to regulate your central nervous system, it is very difficult. You remove that without doing anything else, you've actually created arguably a worse situation from a mental health perspective, or
Yeah,
you can.
ab- absolutely. No doubt about that. Yep. And you're right, right? The further away you get from alcohol, and if you've done the work and stuff, it's not like you have to struggle to stay away from it. You go, okay, this is who I really am now, and you go on about your life, and that kind of leads into the other reason why people keep going back is because you're only using the conscious mind to say, I got to stop drinking. This is bad. It's not good. It's messing up my life. Well, that only works for so long. Willpower and all this kind of stuff, right? That's 5% of you. The other 95% is your subconscious mind. And that's where all of our programs live since the day we were born. We've been being programmed by our parents, teachers, friends, everything. And so we all have programs running in the background. And as drinkers, those programs say, okay, I'm stressed. That equals drink. I want to reward myself after a long week, or I got to take the edge off after a long,
Drink.
hard day. Okay, that equals alcohol. Vacations, celebrating with friends, all of these programs automatically default to alcohol. And so you can say, I'm going to quit drinking and I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to go to meetings. I'm going to abstain. But if you don't change the internal programmings, eventually you're going to keep defaulting back to those programs. And so that's one of the reasons what really has worked for me is changing my subconscious programmings. And that's why I became certified as a hypnotherapist, because you can get in there and do that a lot quicker when you can speak to the subconscious mind. And so we help our clients do that, because if you can change those internal programs that say that all these things equal drinking, then the next time you have a stressful day, you're not going to automatically default to alcohol like an operating system, just going back to that. You're going to create new neural pathways in your brain to figure out a different coping mechanism, a different way to deal with the stress, a different way to go out and have fun without alcohol. So that is, I have found, has been a massive difference in why myself and our clients are successful, is because we're changing that subconscious programming. And I had no idea about any of this stuff a few years ago when I was a drinker.
Yeah, that subconscious is so, so, so important. The subconscious feeds the identity. The subconscious is the programming that gets triggered when there's a fight, flight, or fight response. And it's where that conditioning lies. What else? What other reasons that people keep relapsing in your experience, if there are any?
Well, here's the problem why alcohol is one of the, if not the hardest drug to get over. And it is a drug. People don't like calling it that, but look, alcohol's a drug. Okay.
Oh yeah, it is.
It gets a free pass in society just because it's been accepted for so long. It's been handed down from generation to generation, and it's looked at as the elixir of life, right? So the part of the problem is it is so ingrained in our brains and in society that when we try to stop, excuse me, when we try to stop, it's still in our faces. So our friends are still going to drink, our family's still going to drink, we're still going to watch the Super Bowl, and it's going to be advertised all over the place. We're going to walk down the street on our way home, we're going to drive by the liquor store. If you try to get over some other drug, it's not in your face all the time. It's easier to just kind of move away from it. You don't see everybody doing it. There's no social proof that it's all right. And so I think that's what trips a lot of people up. And the idea of the fact that so many things in our society are tied to fun equals alcohol. You can't go to an event these days without alcohol being there. I mean, it's everywhere. And so it's kind of like you say, I'm going to go on a diet, but then you have to walk into a bakery every day. Like it's tough, right?
Yeah.
You have to be surrounded by it all the time. So that's another reason why I think people keep coming back to it. But again, if you can dispel the myths that you have in your brain and that we've been conditioned to believe about alcohol for so long, you can start to see that, like, what it really is, that there are no benefits to it. And when you pull back the layers, can I swear on this podcast? I just want to.
You can swear, yes, the adult
Okay.
audience only.
So what we do is we have our clients create a bullshit list, because I think it's important for you to sit down and write a list of all the bullshit excuses that you believe you need alcohol in your life. And when you actually write them down and you see that, you go, oh, okay, well, that is kind of bullshit. Like for me, it was, well, I can't sleep if I don't drink. I'm gonna have insomnia. Well, that's not true. I'm sleeping better now than I ever have in my entire life. I won't have fun if I don't have alcohol. That's not true. I still have fun. You know, when you quit drinking, you get to define what fun looks like. Maybe fun, you've just been thinking it's hanging out with people getting drunk and not progressing in their lives and hearing the same stories, telling the same stories, thinking things are funnier when they're really not. Maybe you think that that's fun, but when you get outside of that booze bubble, you go, well, is that really fun?
Mhm.
Or what do I define as fun? Maybe fun for me is going on a hike or getting up early on a Saturday morning and going for a walk or going to the gym, working out. Maybe it's curling up with a good book and learning and educating yourself and learning a new skill. Whatever fun looks like for you, you have to change the programming so it's not tied to alcohol equals fun, because it's not. And so that's what it really comes down to, is kind of dispelling these myths. And like socially awkward, let's say you drink because you feel socially awkward. So your options are, then you could keep numbing yourself with alcohol in these situations to put a band-aid on this issue, or you could put the drink down and learn what's going on. Throw yourself into some situations without alcohol. It's going to be awkward for a couple of times, but then you know what happens? You realize, oh, it's not so bad. And your confidence starts to grow and you start to feel proud of yourself. These are all things that I never was able to do as a drinker. It was always masking, it was always numbing. You don't give yourself the ability to feel proud of yourself and grow in confidence. So, instead of trying to just numb a problem and take it away like with alcohol, you figure out, why is the problem there? Where is that coming from? What do I need to do to address that? And that's the problem where a lot of people miss. Because, for instance, another thing that people think is, I want to be, I have so much anxiety without alcohol. That's why I need to drink, because I have anxiety and all this stress. The number one thing that our clients tell us is their anxiety goes way down without alcohol, because it's actually the alcohol that's keeping them in this anxiety loop, right? The
Yeah.
anxiety is what's kicking you in the shin all day from, it's just going, oh, geez, you're anxious, you're anxious. The only thing that's going to make this better is drink. And then you drink and you feel that few moments of euphoria, and then it's the cycle all over again. But when you get far enough away from the alcohol, you realize, oh, I guess I don't have that much anxiety. Like, so all of these things, the myths, you have to understand that they're all BS that you've been led to believe and that you've yourself believed over many years.
Well, and back to that identity thing, for me, realizing all of these behaviors that brought me so much quote unquote pleasure and escape and release and reward shined under the light of day were actually self harming. I was self harming myself when I was abusing alcohol and using that as a justification to do other things, including getting hooked on heroin, including porn, including prostitutes. The alcohol was an important part. It greased the skids, and it was all part of this um, myth that this was my reward. I work hard. I don't get shit for myself. No one gives a shit about my problems, which was completely untrue. Just these stories that I were telling myself, finally realizing, like, wait a minute, this isn't self help. This is self harm. Shattering that myth was very important to me.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's so true, because we think this is my reward. I deserve this, right? Well, we'll say things like that. We'll tell ourselves these stories, and that's another big thing that I had to realize. Like, I was just telling myself the same story over and over again. Like, oh, I have an addictive personality. That's just the way that I am. Well, that's not true. That's the story I'm telling myself. So that's what I'm manifesting. But it is, and it's all about, with any addiction. I've come to realize it's all about that those quick dopamine hits, the cheap pleasure, momentarily pleasure, but that leaves you empty. The more you keep going for those cheap little dopamine hits like that, and not thinking long term, is that, at least in my circumstance, it was keeping me miserable and it was making me more miserable. And I
Mhm.
just realized, like, the more I'm doing this, whether it be alcohol, and before that, like I said, some other things, it was the gambling, the smoking, porn, everything like that. The more I do this, the smaller my world gets, the darker it gets, the less hopeful it gets, and it's kind of like you shrink yourself into this little box, and then all that you end up looking forward to becomes that thing that you're addicted to. And when you're not doing it, you're thinking about it, and it just becomes controlling, and you're in this tiny little box. And then when you break free from it, your world opens up, and then all of a sudden opportunities start flowing in. You start to feel better. It takes a while for the dopamine receptors to kind of even it out, because when you drink, man, your dopamine is getting flooded with so much unnatural dopamine, and so you're used to like feeling like way up here. And so for a while, yeah, you're going to feel down low because you're not
Yeah.
getting those spikes. And I think, again, you talk about why people keep going back. It's because they're not they're not hitting these, and it takes a while to balance it out. But eventually you start to get here, and these little dopamine spikes, little things in life, like a beautiful day, a flower, your child's smile, whatever it may be. Those little spikes are what you need, and you start to appreciate life so much more.
And so much healthier than a client coined this word. I can't take credit for it. The dopamine spikes that you talked about remind me of the high fructose corn syrup. Now,
Yeah.
when we apply it to alcohol, the high fructose corn syrup, it's so empty, it's so vacant, it's so bad for your body. It's creating these temporary moments of satiation, the release, the reward, flooded in it. It's so good, but every high there's a low, and that once those lows get bigger and bigger is when people finally say, "Hey, I need to do something about this."
Yeah, no doubt about it. Yep.
Are there any other myths that we want to cover? I want to get on to talk about what's different about what you do, but I want to make sure we didn't miss any myths.
No, I think we pretty much covered them. A big one that I hear a lot is, "Oh, I'm going to be so bored without alcohol, so bored." And there's two things I want to address on that. First of all, it's okay to be bored. Allow yourself to be bored. You know why?
Hmm.
Because that's where creativity comes from. And we are so bombarded with everything these days of stimulation, whether it be social media or the news, or I mean, there's always something. And so we've conditioned ourselves to feel like, got to be doing something. I can't just sit. But when you allow yourself to just sit and just be, whether it's meditating or just taking a break, taking a walk, without listening to anything, man, amazing things can happen. So allow yourself to be bored. And the other part of that is, it, there's so many things you can do with an alcohol-free life. It's an excuse to say that you're bored. Because look, when I was a drinker, you know what I did? I would come home from work and I would sit my ass on the couch and I would watch TV that was meaningless, that I would never remember, and I would get drunk for like 6 hours a night. That equates to 90 days, 3 months every year of doing nothing. That is boring. That is a boring life. And so, when we talk about being bored without alcohol, think about how boring your life actually is with alcohol. And so
Yeah,
I just wanted to address, because that's a big one I hear a lot,
me
because it
too.
can
Me
be,
too.
it's a transition, right? When you're used to using it to cure boredom or whatever, there might be some times where you're a little bit bored, but you got to be okay with that.
Well, and first of all, being bored is a privilege because there are people throughout the world who do not have that leisure time. And the other thing about boredom is, and while there's true boredom, but when someone is so desperate to escape from that boredom, what's really happening is there's some wound going on there. There's the fear of being by yourself, the fear of being by your thoughts, the fear of just sitting and doing nothing. It's actually ridiculously hard thing to do. And us men, we're strong. We like to do hard things. Sit there on your bed and do, if you're new to this journey, see how hard it is to be bored. Sit on your bed and do nothing for 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. If you can make it to 15 minutes, do it. It's hard. It's really,
Yeah.
really hard because that's when the demons come. That's when the low self esteem hits us. That's when the abandonment hits us. There's a lot happening in that boredom, like you talked about earlier, the subconscious under the surface that says, we got to escape from this. This is torture. This sucks. But within that suck is a beauty of life and a richness of those simple and mundane things. I remember I rescued a and talk about privilege, man. I rescued a fly from my hot tub, and I sat there and watched this housefly clean its wings, get dry, and shake. It was the most like I'm watching National Geographic in my backyard here in Northern California. It's one of the most amazing experiences I had in my life, and I never would have been able to appreciate something like that when I was stuck in my addiction. It was wild. It really was.
Yeah, no, and I've had so many moments like that too, and I love it. And you just sit there and you appreciate. You're so grateful. When you can become grateful, your life will change, and that's And you talk about sitting in the uncomfortableness there. Yeah, it's going to be weird at first. It's going to be very uncomfortable. The more you can get comfortable being uncomfortable and sitting in discomfort, the better you will be. Because just like anything, when you started out, it's uncomfortable. You don't know how to do it. Driving a car, riding a bike, starting a new job, it's always awkward and and it's uncomfortable. But eventually, you get the hang of it. Eventually, if you just give yourself time and be patient with yourself, you can have a whole new life. And so many people, I think, miss out on that because the demons come in, the voices come in, and they succumb to them. But yeah, you're spot on with that.
Yep, and then they have to numb, cope, and escape. So tell me, what's different? We've talked about this, but tell me more. What's different about what you do? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, we help people. We give you the full kitchen sink, as I like to say, because there are a lot of band-aid solutions out there. You'll come up against a 21-day challenge or a 30-day reset, or here's a free course for 30 days. Go watch some videos and good luck. And when it comes to overcoming alcohol, I don't believe in band-aid solutions because they're temporary. And so what we do is we have three pillars that we work on. Clarity, again, talking about we got to figure out what got us here? What is going on that we're avoiding, or what do we need to figure out so that we can move forward? Okay. So we help people get clarity on that, but also on where you're going. We want you to get excited about your life. We want you to be empowered to choose not to drink. You're not forced to be a non-drinker. Nobody's telling you to do this because that's never going to work. You're not hitting rock bottom or anything like that. You're going, you know what? I'm tired of the way alcohol is making me feel. It's not serving me anymore. I know I'm meant for more, and I'm going to go get that life. So we help you realize that and get excited and help you build out your ideal life. We do a lot of mindset work. We help you find that confidence, build that self-trust and self-esteem, self-worth up in yourself. The turn down the inner critic voice, bring out the inner champion voice in your head so that you love yourself. There has to be love and compassion, and you have to believe that you're worthy of a life without any sort of substance holding you back. It has to start there. So we help people with that. Because if you don't have that, man, it's hard. It's hard to keep progressing. So we do that. And then the reframing part of it with the hypnotherapy, with the teaching people how to reprogram their own subconscious mind. They can do it anytime. They can really build a beautiful life the way that they want it. And so we focus on that and getting excited about your life. We don't focus on the shame, the guilt, making you feel bad about where you've been. We have one-on-one coaching, we have group coaching. Our community is amazing because it's high functioning, successful, driven people that you're going to relate to and go, okay, geez, thank God I'm not the only person who has felt that way or thinks this. That alone is gonna be massively beneficial. And you'll get these little nuggets in our calls from other people that these light bulb moments will go off. And man, it's just really one of the best things that our clients say is they're like, I can't believe how easy this seems. It seems way too easy. And it's partly true because the way that we do it is different. You don't have to struggle with this for the rest of your life. You don't have to label yourself any of these demeaning labels and all this kind of stuff. You can have a really wonderful life on the other side of alcohol. And the beautiful thing is it has a ripple effect on those around you. Your friends, your family, people start seeing you change. They start asking you, like, man, how did you do it? You're just different. They go, yeah, my relationship with alcohol hasn't been so good. I can't tell you how many of our clients, their friends and family stop drinking or at least take a break from it too, because they see the benefits. Like we literally get to see people transform themselves, their souls come back to them. And it's a beautiful thing, man.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, how do people find you, Chris? Tell everybody, your Facebook page, your website, if people are interested in addressing this problem. And I strongly suggest you do. Alcohol is poison. It is bad for your body. There's no one who drank their life away and said, "Oh, this is great. This is, I really, really feel good about yourself." So if you're listening to this and you found yourself like Chris did, getting into bad habits, or those bad habits getting worse during COVID. I read that we drank more in COVID than as a society than we drank our entire history. I don't know if that statistic's accurate, but I know
Wow.
alcoholism went up ridiculous. So yeah, tell us how people can find you, Chris.
Yeah. So you can find me. My website is coachbychris.com. That's Chris with the CH. You can join our free Facebook group, which is called Freedom from Alcohol. That is the name of our program, of our mastermind, by the way, too. And if you're interested in working with us, you can schedule a free call with me. We'll talk about you and your situation and see if we can help. And if we will, we'll see what that looks like. Again, coachbychris.com is where you can find all of that information. And you can find me on TikTok is where I do a lot of videos. That's where I have the most followers. And so you can find me there on all social media channels. It's at Coach by Chris.
Awesome. Awesome. I love your TikToks. They've inspired me. I have found abject failure on TikTok. So thank you, Chris, for inspiring me to get back into it. I love your hooks. You got great content. Thank you so much for being here. Look forward to having you again. Great podcast. Great getting to know you. Anything else you want my audience to know about you?
I really appreciate you having me on here, Craig. It's been a wonderful conversation. And I'll just say one more thing about the fact that there's something called a dry drunk, where a lot of people quit drinking, but they still want it. They still wish they could have it, and they're forcing themselves not to have it. They go, I can't be around people that are drinking. I can't go to a bar because I might be tempted to drink, and that is not what I want you to do. That sounds like a miserable life for me, and that was one of the things again that kept me from doing the 12-step thing. So I want you to understand it doesn't have to be that way. If you're going, yeah, well, even if I quit drinking, I'm going to still want it. I'm going to still miss it. I'm going to go on vacation and it's going to be miserable. It is not that way. You can have a wonderful alcohol-free life. And I just really want to push that point across that it doesn't have to be doom and gloom. It can be beautiful without alcohol.
Well, in a comment for those dry drunks, if you are a dry drunk and if you are sober, you will get great value in Chris's program, because you'll address those deeper underlying issues to break you from the prison of obsessing over not doing something. It's no way to live. Now, listen, if it's working for you and you're happy, you're experiencing joy, good. Then go on with your life. But if you don't have to be a drunk, you don't have to be at rock bottom to get help. This is life improvement. So reach out to Chris, coachbychris.com. Thanks for being here, man. Look forward to seeing you again. Thanks, brother.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye, everybody.